Hello, welcome to the 225 Q&A practice. We're going to start off with the plaintiff questioning. Ready? Can you give me an estimate, 5 minutes, 1 minute? I don't know, more than 5 minutes. And you started crying. When was the first time you started crying? When I ran into the garage. Then when did you stop crying? When the ambulance came and took Daniel away. Where was your brother Josh when you went back into the garage? Did you see him anywhere? He was coming. First he had to get his shoe. Okay, where was his shoe? It was at the end of the driveway when he ran. Okay, and how did his shoe end up at the end of the driveway? When he was running, he never ties his shoes and his tongue, it's real puffed up and the shoe starts to fall off. So he lost one of his shoes? Yes. So he was at the end of the driveway? Yes. And you were inside the garage? Yes. And what was Josh doing? He was coming in. Was he? He was crying. He was crying? Yes. Was he walking in or was he running? He was hopping, putting on his shoe. That was Josh? Yes. Okay, and did he hop all the way up to the driveway? Yes. And he was crying during his hopping? No. He stopped crying? No, he wasn't crying yet because he didn't know the dog bit him because he was across next door. So when you first saw Josh coming back, he wasn't crying? No. And when did he start crying? He saw Daniel's leg. When was that? When he came in the house. So where was Daniel when you saw Josh coming up the driveway? He was already in the house. So when you went into the garage, you first saw David hopping, correct? That is a yes? Yes. Then he hopped. Did he hop all the way inside the garage where you were standing? Yes. And were you still standing about 4 or 5 feet from the little door? Yeah. Okay, and then after he hopped to where you were standing, where did he go? I don't know. He just went into the house. Did anybody help him get into the house? No, he just hopped into the house and I went to go get Josh. So Daniel went inside the house, correct? Yes. And then did you stand 4 to 5 feet from the little door? No, I walked a little bit farther. How much farther? I don't know. Do you know how many steps you took? No. Were you still in the garage when you saw Justin? Yeah. And how soon after Daniel went into the house did you see Josh? I'm sorry, I said Justin, I meant Josh. I don't know, less than 30 seconds. When was the first time you saw him I'm sorry, at the end of the driveway? Was he with anybody? No. Then you saw him pick up his shoe? Is that a yes? Yes. As he was putting on his shoe, he's hopping up the driveway? Yes. And then did you exchange any words while he's hopping up the driveway? No. When you did talk to Daniel, I'm sorry, strike that. When did you talk to Josh? When he came up into the house? When he actually came inside the house? Yes. So you met him inside the garage? Yes. And then did you both of you go inside the house? Yes. And then where were you when you started talking to Josh? We were in the kitchen. When did you guys start to talk? What did you guys talk about? I don't know, I forgot. When did he find out that Daniel had been bitten? When he came inside the house? Was Daniel in the kitchen? No, he was in the family room on the floor. But you and Josh were in the kitchen, right? Yes. And then from the kitchen, did you guys go into the family room? No, we stayed in the kitchen. Okay, and then who told Josh that Daniel had been bitten? No one. He knew when he came inside the house and he was on the floor and he saw his leg and he was crying. So at some point in the kitchen, you guys went into the family room? No, we went from the family room into the kitchen. Okay, so you went into the family room first? Yes. And that's when Josh saw Daniel? Yes. Was that the first time Josh knew Daniel had been bitten? Yes. Was that the first time that you knew Daniel had been bitten? Yes. Was that the first time you saw any blood on Daniel? Yes. No. You saw blood on Daniel before then? When was that? When he always gets scraped and scratched when he tries to do stunts on his bike, he falls off and... Okay, but for the incident that happened on July 1st, when was the first time you saw blood on Daniel? Okay, yes. Let me ask it again. Do you remember, were you inside the house when you first saw blood on Daniel? Yes, I was. Okay, I'm going to switch transcripts. Okay. Again, this is plaintiff attorney questioning. Okay, here we go. And a woman calls the police? Yes. When he fired into the house and then he saw the officer and escapes in the bushes, etc., it is very possible that upon discharging that weapon into the house and the arrival of the police, that at that particular time his mind was trying to get away or get out of a situation. I don't think you can separate anger from fear. It's like a cornered animal. He was running and fighting back. And he was in a panic situation, you felt? I felt that way, a major factor, yes. He was running, fighting back, and he was not trying to get away. One also could assume that he was probably trying to escape from something. Doctor, just getting back to the emergency room in the hospital, you have indicated something to the effect that when a person is down in the hospital, that he is under close observation. Now, you are not telling us that you have any information this evening that when Mr. Johnson was brought into the hospital, that he was not left alone with a policeman watching him for a couple of minutes during this period of time. No, I presented this theory as the probable period. They might not, but depending if they were in a rush situation. Were you aware when he first came into the hospital that he actually refused medical assistance and the officers were talking to him and the doctors were asking him to allow them to treat his wounds? Just to the extent of his recollection that he didn't realize he was in need of medical assistance until he saw his fingers flopping, and you didn't have an opportunity to check to see if he had actually refused medical treatment in the beginning? No. So you have no information to impart to us about what happened that evening in the emergency room? No. Now, doctor, I noticed that you have indicated in the reports, I'm reading in the reports, that the defendant has had several other experiences, drinking experiences that may or may not have produced hallucinations. Is that correct? Yes. I noticed that on page 2 of your report that you have indicated that there have been certain instances of very aggressive and assaultive behavior, and you felt you were not, or you thought they were not connected with any hallucinatory experiences. Would you mind reading that last part of that paragraph to us? I believe it is in the first paragraph on page 2, down towards the last 6 lines. He recalls one previous incident. I think this is, are you reading from March 10th, the report from March 10th, doctor? Yes. Which one is yours? I have both. I have March 10th on page 2. Is that the one you are referring to? Yes. Yes, Your Honor. Page 2, about 6 lines from the bottom of the first paragraph. It starts with, There have been repeated instances of his becoming aggressive and assaultive, and these are not connected with any hallucinatory experiences, and he has total amnesia of these incidents. There may or may not have been hallucinations, but he has no recollection of them. He has found himself in jail for fighting police who were booking him for public intoxication, and he has found himself in an emergency room having his lip repaired for an injury sustained in a fight that he could not recall. These are previous instances that he has told you about. Is that correct? Yes. Now, this is not exactly an unusual phenomenon that the individual take the fight with the lip an individual gets involved in. He is drinking pretty heavily, and he gets involved in a fight. The next morning he wakes up and he has a busted lip or a sore hand or whatever. This is not an unusual experience for an individual who has been drinking a little heavy. You mean the injury or the amnesia? The amnesia. The amnesia is quite common in a person where there is a long history of drinking. You don't get this when you just begin drinking. And this amnesia doesn't necessarily mean that the individual, at the time he is in a fight, does not have an awareness of what he is doing, that he is involved in a fight. It deals with the recollection factor of the brain, doesn't it? Yes, so that the person can be acting in a situation where he has full or he has awareness of what he is doing, and then the next day, for some reason, the brain does not function to put this recollection information in the brain. That is correct. There's another possibility, isn't there, doctor? I'm thinking of a situation where perhaps a person does something untoward or improper, and he has been drinking pretty heavily, and the next day he prefers not to remember those events. Perhaps you as a doctor could get him talking about it, or maybe he just won't talk about the events at all, and it's somewhat a conscious effort not to recollect. Have you had experiences where people have done that, or it's quite common to have what we call retrograde confabulation, where one has an area of amnesia and then fills it in because he can't tolerate having an area of amnesia, and they make up and figure out what should have happened. Is there also another possibility where the person, if some information is given to him, starts to remember the party and the incident, but he prefers not to talk about it? If there is a possibility of a recollection, that may be hazy, but he just as soon not discuss it in full detail with anyone. It's embarrassing. This is a possibility, yes. So we are dealing with the recollection function of the brain versus the awareness function when we are talking about amnesia. Is that correct? Yes. As far as his telling you that he didn't remember getting the gun and getting ammunition, you put this down as a situation where he was having amnesia about those facts. Yes, I did. You accepted that statement as being true? Yes. When he spoke to you about the events of the day that evening, I believe he indicated to you that he had been in a bar drinking, and he went and had some pizza, ate some pizza in his truck, came back and either had one gin and tonic or was possibly drinking the second one when he saw this image. Does that refresh your recollection of what he told you about? He was not too definite on the number he had had. He thought he had had 1 or 2 drinks, but at that point his memory was not that good really as to know how much he really had drunk during this lapse of time. Did he tell you he ran out of the bar? Yes, he remembered running out of the bar. Did he tell you anything about his keys being locked in his truck? No. He did recollect about the police telling him to get his hands up or get up. Yes, he does recall that. And standing with his hands on top of the car while they searched him. Is that correct? Yes. Did he tell you that he then remembers getting in the police car and riding to the hospital? Yes. And you said something about his head being down towards the bottom of the police unit? Yes. Okay, that concludes our Q&A practice for the 225 class.